Hi guys, welcome everyone. Glad you guys can be here. We're going to be taking a look at using our open and editor command and some strategies for handing things off between apps. I love to use different editing apps and that way all my organization stays in Mylio, but I can jump around as needed. So let me share my screen. Looks like Laura, you just need to grant me permission or elevate me to co-host. There we go. Cool. Try this now. I'm using a beta version of Mylio, so you might see a few things that are not yet out, but I'll give you a few sneak peeks since you're here and you're early. This right here is our updated dashboard that's in the works right now. It's not quite done, but you can see, for example, I can know sort of exactly what's going on, like my MacBook, which is right over here and closed, is in need of one file, and it can get that file from Mylio Drive or from my NAS. So, if I were to open up that laptop and launch Mylio, and once it connects to the internet, it'll come online and start syncing, and I'd see that. This is an important update that we're looking forward to shipping later this year. And we've worked really hard to take a lot of feedback about how people are used to using things. And we're trying to make this part a little bit clearer. So hopefully you'll like it, but you can kind of see a little bit more what's going on exactly with the device and, what a device needs, exactly what it's missing. Like in this case, yes, it needs a file, but it needed it from a thumbnail, so I can kind of see what's going on and tell a little bit better. Okay. So just things like that. Thanks guys for coming. And let me jump around and show a few tips and tricks and things I like to do to get the job done. First off, one thing that I really like is using the photo tree or the folder tree here to find things. So this way I can just start typing in the folder tree. We go back to Mylio. There we go. And it will actually look for things. So if I type in Hano, for example, I find lots of different things I can search for. And these are going to give me quick filters, and then it would filter things down of things that matched. Now that's the quick filter view. If I click the second item here, that's the actual folder tree. So most of our views have a quick filter view, and you might see smart tags in there and other things, or a folder tree, or similarly, we have an album tree. And this is kind of cool because if you type, and in this case, I'm just going to type in the word pano, I see lots of folders with panoramic photos in it. So I love to do panoramic photography. It's one of the original computational type photography. And quite easily, effectively, what you do is you pan the camera, and ideally, you have about a 50% overlap from picture to picture. You're supposed to use a tripod. You're supposed to be really clean and do great stuff with this. But the reality is that Photoshop can be pretty forgiving when it comes time to sort of put those together. So, here I'm just sort of jumping around. I'm looking for things as I'm typing. I can find my way through the tree. And you see how easy it is just to kind of get to different things, right? So you can find different items pretty quickly. Okay. So this works pretty well. Similarly here, I also have some HDR images, and I'm going to show you what I can do with those to kind of do a merge. So you might notice I have different times of day of the same picture. I also waited for the sky to change. So this is another type of computational photography. So one of my favorite things to do is to go find a beautiful sunset, shoot an HDR bracket where you set the camera up to cover a range of exposures, an underexposure, an overexposure, a middle exposure. But then to really make this awesome, wait and let the sky change a little bit, and it's going to get better. So that can be a lot of fun. And that's kind of what I did here. So this lets me just, grab a wide range of exposure options to kind of show the whole thing of what's going on with the image. and dial in sort of the targets that I want there. And all of these came from really more or less the same locked off position. So this gives me that flexibility to kind of take a few different pictures and merge them together. Now, if you are going to hand off things to another editor, it's a good idea to make sure that you have the originals on your system so you can download. I'm working on a system that has a vault attached, so I don't have to worry about that. I've already got the files here. But if you didn't and you're on a remote device, then you would want to download those to your current device. And then what you can do is say photo open with and hand off to another application that you want. Okay. So that makes it possible to give these to another app or to even select that app by choosing other. And then you can actually just navigate to the app of your choice. So if for some reason it doesn't appear in the list, you can still get around that and just sort of force it. Now, when you do this, you're given a choice of what you hand off. So you can edit the original. And if you have raw files, then you can also specify that you want those raw files to hand off. If I'm handing off to something like Photoshop to do an advanced decode or an HDR merge, I'm going to hand off the raw. If I've already cropped and straightened and I'm just doing something lightweight, I may take the Mylio edits and hand those off as well. So you kind of get the best of both there. I'll click continue and it's going to take those, queue up Photoshop, and do the handoff here. And in this case, you see that all the raw files opened into a single camera raw window. Okay. Now let me take a look, and I'm not used to this exact format, so Laura, you'll have to let me know if there's questions or things I need to slow down or show, but I'll do my best.
You're doing great. Thanks.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is select all of these. And usually the only thing I suggest initially is you can take advantage of any sort of optics or lens correction if there's anything you need to do to kind of fix profile correction. So you can see there that it got rid of the wide angle distortion and it kind of did a little bit of fixing the edge. Now you might be saying, well, where's that checkbox in Mylio? You actually don't usually need that checkbox in Mylio because we usually just assume you want to get rid of the lens correction. And so if we can read the lens correction data, we'll correct the lens data when we decode your raw file. But Photoshop assumes you want a little more control or that you like having lots of options and checkboxes. To be clear, I love Photoshop. I've written 5 books on Photoshop through the years, so I love lots of apps. And while I love making Mylio better and helping design new features, one of the things we did do really clearly is make it super easy to organize with Mylio and then hand off to other apps. So now that I've got these here, I'll just click on the 3 dots and I'm going to say merge to HDR. Now, what this is going to do is create a new high dynamic range image. And a lot of people have a bad opinion about HDR because there's a lot of people that abuse HDR or overprocess their images. Quite simply, I want you to think of it this way. Um, an HDR image is usually either 16-bit float or 32 bits. And that's because it takes the bit depth or the tonal ranges of the individual photos and starts to merge them together. Now, what's kind of cool about that is if you don't abuse it and over push it, it's just like having a better quality raw file because every 2 bits of information is going to give us 4 times more information to adjust shadows and highlights and tone. So for things like landscape photography, real estate photography, it is fantastic because what we don't understand about the human eye is that when you're out there looking at a scene, your eye is responding and adjusting to the light like crazy. And our eyes, quite honestly, cost way more than our camera sensors and our camera lenses. I know that we all spend too much probably on our camera gear, but I guarantee you getting a new set of eyes is a lot more expensive. So I can choose to align the images if they were shifted, and that could be because I bumped the camera slightly. In this case, I didn't really need it because I just tightened the tripod down. And auto settings is going to help. Deghosting is looking for changes where things might have moved. I'm going to do a low deghost here. In fact, I think I'm going to do off because I wanted to kind of just merge those together. But that's good if you've got things blowing in the wind or moving a lot. Once you merge these, it's going to ask you, where do you want them? Now, in this case, it's putting it back in the same folder. That's cool. I'll save this DNG file there, and that's good because Mylio will also pick it up and then replicate it to all of my backup devices. Because Mylio is watching the source folder, anything I put back into that source folder is automatically added to Mylio and automatically backed up. So now, if we compare this to any of these one pictures, you should see that the HDR photo is kind of like the best of. I got the best parts of the sky, the best parts of the foreground, the best parts of the rock. So now what I'm going to do is just quickly dial this in. For me, I like the fact that I can just kind of click right here on the histogram and nudge it into place. So I'm just kind of shifting around the shadows and the black points. If you really want to push it, you can actually go right into HDR space and even work with more dynamic range to really recover back parts of that sky. And that's kind of what's happening there, is that ability to push it a little bit further and really finesse that. But ultimately, you'll have to preview that for SDR. And that kind of gives you an idea of what it's going to look like once you're all done, of how it's going to kind of come together. Okay. So that's looking pretty good to me as a base image. Now what I'm going to do is just finish this off, and I'll say select the sky. That's going to make a basic selection of the sky. And I'll put just a little bit more gold in there, or a little more saturation. See how I can tweak it and just fine tune that a little, right? If I pull the highlights down, I might push the shadows the other way, take the whites up and the blacks down. And what that does is a nice conversion. I always believe in naming things, so I'll call this sky. And then quite simply, I'm just going to say reverse, duplicate and invert, and we'll call that ground. Yeah. And this allows me to just gently lift up the ground and kind of dial that in correctly of where I want the rocks to be. And then for me, I like to just put a little gradient here and kind of ramp down the exposure on the foreground. So it just falls off a little bit and the shadows pull you into the frame. Now at this point, I got everything I need. I've got the DNG, but the DNG file is really kind of a raw file. And what I suggest is you click here and choose to save a high quality TIFF file. So I'll save it in the same location. I'm going to save it as a TIFF file. 16 bits per channel is the greater color range here. I'll leave everything else the same. And I generally recommend Adobe RGB. It's a good middle of the road color palette that looks good on the web, looks good when you open it, but each person has their own. And I'll click save. And now I can also just click done and store these settings. Now, what I'm going to do is let that kind of run. And I can now switch back to Mylio. What's going to happen here is it's now scanning and looking through my folders. Now, if you have something going like a sync, and I'm doing some pretty big syncs here, it may take a second before the scanner picks that up, but it will drop it back here into the Mylio folder. Another thing you can do is you can come over to your library stats and look at recent media additions. And this will make it easy to also see anything else that recently came in or you added. So it'll pop up here in the list pretty soon. Now, if for some reason you want to force this, what you can do is just open up your sync panel, turn off sync or in this case, my sync is going to OneDrive in the cloud, which is a little slow. I can just turn that off. And once that's not trying to run in the background or do a big sync, then Mylio will pick up stuff a little bit more quickly. Or if you ever need to nudge it, you can just say, hey, organize, scan for changes. And it will scan the current folder you're in. And there it is. It picked up the change. See? So there's that new file I just made right there. Now, I want to point out something here. I have dust on my sensor. I'm bad at this. So what I mean by this is that I always seem to end up with dust on my sensor, and it's because I'm not as careful with changing my lenses as I should. So this is a case where I am going to edit the photo, but in this case, I'm working with a high quality TIFF, and I want to make a permanent change to the file to get rid of that. So I'm going to say photo open with, and I'm going to hand it off to Photoshop again. But this time, I'm going to edit the original, not the raw file. And it's going to open up the real file in Photoshop. So now, using a tool like the spot healing brush, for example, I can just click over some of those dust spots and wipe them out. Okay. There we go. And that just kind of lets me get rid of them. Okay. So that works pretty nicely. It's a nice, easy way to look for any dust spots you don't want. You also have a thing that you can kind of move around with here. So, that looks like I got them all. Maybe one there, little one there. Okay. Zoom back out. Looks good. Save my changes and close it. And I'll come back to Mylio. And in just a second, it will actually pick up that change. And when it finishes the scanning here, see, it found it. And so it updates. So the one thing that can get in the way of this bouncing out to stuff and back is syncing. Because if Mylio is doing an active sync, it doesn't want to introduce new changes while you're in the middle of moving things around. So what I suggest when you go to do this active editing is either pause syncing by opening up your preferences and just flipping sync off for a few minutes and then turning it back on when you're done. But look at how fast I could just jump back and forth between apps. So in this case, I'm going to hand off to another app. I can just take the same photo and say photo open with, and I'm going to hand off to another app called Radiant Photo. Now, Radiant is a pixel optimizer. It does some color grading. It is really good at enhancing some of the images for details and kind of filling that in. And so, I can just hand that off to the app. So let me just go ahead and launch that real quick. Here we go. There we are. And I'll hand it off. Just opening really quick. And when you do those handoffs to other apps, Mylio will switch to the app, or if you don't see it, you just click on the dock, but you should see it trigger it, and then the picture will hand off. Now, in this case, I had a missed handoff because I had to force quit an app. It happens sometimes, not a big deal. You can always tell it to do the handoff, or it actually is probably his opening. It looks like it's a disk speed issue. Give it one more shot. Okay, go one more time. It's normal to have 5 apps open, right? Let's do that really quick. Especially when 2 of them are beta. There we go. So I'll go back to where I just was. Remember, I mentioned that concept of library stats, recent media additions. Really easy way to get back to files you recently added. So that just took me right back to where I was. And I'll just go ahead and open that again. There we go. So this will allow you to do handoffs between apps, and you can bounce them between. The other thing I'll say, if you ever need it, is remember, Mylio also supports the ability to reveal files. So you can always right click and tell it that you want to reveal the file, and that will take you there. So here I'm going to say edit the original, click continue, and it should do the handoff. All right, while that's doing that, let me see what else I can tell you about stuff. Yep, we'll close this one down because we don't need that open. I got way too many things running at once. Let's see what else I can close. There we go. Okay, I had to free up some RAM. That was all it was. Okay, so there's that pixel optimizer. It kind of filled in things, but what I actually want to do is use this and take advantage of a black and white conversion. So I'm going to go here and just make a nice black and white. And I can play with different choices. I like it. And I'm going to select where the sky was and just darken that down a little bit. Or I can go through different options here and just kind of layer it in. Okay. I like it. And let me just put a little vignette. Now, what I'm showing you here is, and you might be saying, you did all that work to make color. Why are you making it black and white? Well, I'm making it black and white so it's easy for you to see for a moment, but I want to point something out. When you go to save a file, if you add underscore display to it and you put it back in the same directory, so I'm going to say, hey, go ahead and put this back exactly where it came from, same folder as original, and rename it file name underscore display. Let's save. What will happen is that Mylio will pick that up and will stack it with the original. So you can end up with a third version of a file. Okay. So now if I'm back here, what's going to happen, I'll just go ahead and reveal that in the folder, is when it finishes the scanning and the changing, it's going to have the color photo on one layer and it will pick up the black and white folder on another layer. It's just got to finish scanning here in a little sync. So once that's done with that synchronicity, it'll pick it up and drop that in. Now to your question about Topaz, you can, I'm not going to rate Radiant versus Topaz. One, I do work with many software companies, and so it's not my job here. It's your job to feel free to download a trial if you want to play with it. I will say that Radiant has a perpetual license, whereas Topaz tends to be subscription-based. So it's an easy thing to add, but you can take a look at that on your own. Okay, let's do a different workflow here for a moment. And I'm going to open up a picture that I want to hand off to do a little bit more editing in. Okay. So let's just jump in and we'll come up to here, do a nice nighttime photo. And for one reason or another, I decide that I want to take these into a different application, but that application isn't really designed to edit photos, but maybe it's designed to make a slideshow or a presentation. So one of the things that a lot of people miss is that Mylio has a pretty cool clipboard. So what I can do is select the pictures that I want to move to that other application. Maybe it's a page layout tool. Maybe it is a presentation tool, right? And so I can grab the photos that I want to share or that I want to drop in to that slideshow or presentation, like so. And then all you have to do is go underneath your share menu. Okay. So let me just grab those really quick. 2, 3. You can also do this with an album. So that's another easy way to kind of organize things. But under the share menu here, you have system clipboard. So you can click on the settings icon, pick your file format, I could say, hey, JPEG for presentation quality, right? PNGs in that case. And Adobe RGB, great. 16-bit, nice high quality ping. No watermark, great. Share to system clipboard. That's gonna load them on my system clipboard. And then what I can do is just switch to the other application and paste them in. Okay, so let me just make a new presentation real quick. Yeah. And you can go to whatever slide you need and just start to paste. Okay, so let me do that one more time. Copy, paste. Grabbing the wrong one. Let's do that again. There we go. I think it has it now. Copy. And let's check over here. Paste. There, it worked. It's because I took too many. So here we go. Paste. See? And it actually added that right there, which is pretty cool. So I can move that between things. So if I need to grab stuff, I can just pull it right off of the clipboard there and actually move that between applications. So that's a useful way to copy items without having to make new files on your desktop that you temporarily stack and then you have to clean up or you accidentally duplicate. I suggest you don't start going into your folders and grabbing things and moving them around because you might accidentally drag them out of your folder. But copying things to your system clipboard is a pretty easy way to go about it. And then you can just start to, copy and paste things like I did there. See, multiple photos all got copied and pasted at one time. Okay. And it'll even start to queue them up onto your clipboard. So it may take a moment if you do a large number, but if they're already JPEGs, it's pretty simple too. And you can speed that up by doing something smaller here. So I'll just say, hey, go ahead and do that as JPEG, high quality, share. And that'll share a little bit quicker to your clipboard. And then you can do the copy and paste. Okay, does that make sense to folks as another way to quote externally edit? Like if you need to hand things off to another tool like PowerPoint, Keynote, page layout tool, Microsoft Word, you name it. It's an easy way to get stuff over. All right, let's do one more edit. I'm going to do a portrait here really quick. I'll just paste that. Yep, there we go. Okay, just close a few things because I got way too many things open. But there you go. You can see all those pictures came across, by the way. See? So on my clipboard, I was just able to paste them right into the document. And that works with Slack. It works with text messages. It's pretty cool. And on your mobile app, you can do that with the share menu. You can send things to your clipboard or paste them or send them to another app, which is kind of cool. Right, let's do a picture. And I'll go ahead and just grab something. Grab it here. And I'm going to take a older photo. Let's go here and we'll take one of my grandmother. So one thing that can be fun, you see here I have a colorized photo, is you can do that colorization. And Photoshop has some fun tools for this. So let me show you how that can work. So you can take your picture and again, just tell it that you want to open that in another app. So I'll say photo and I'm going to open this with another app. So I got it there. That's good. You just, there we go. So interesting. Why did it lose the open with command? That's okay. Let me figure out what's going on. Yep, I'm good there. So this I can now hand off to another app. So I'm just having an issue. Photo. Give me 1 second.
Is it because you're in people view? Would that make a difference?
It
This is a
shouldn't.
folder.
It shouldn't, but I'll take a look at it in the folder and see. Maybe. No, it's just that I have a beta version of Mylio and it's being cranky, which is okay. Let me just quit it and relaunch it really quick. This is why we beta test before we ship. So it's possible that I broke it by doing something. That's okay. There we go. We'll go back. When in doubt, nudge. There we go. Photo, open with. Yeah, it was weird. It switched to mobile menus for a moment. I must have hit something that confused it to make it think it was an iPad because I didn't have my full menus. So there we go. Open with Photoshop. And if that happens, let's try it again. Photo, open with. There we go. And I'm going to, in this case, hand off a copy with the Mylio adjustments. And I'll go to 16-bit so it's got more information. Now, this file's not very large resolution. This is like a passport photo. It's pretty low res. So first off, using image size, I can tell it that I want it to go ahead and scale up a little bit. Or I can come under here, like under percentages and say, hey, 300%, and tell it that I want it to use the best for enlargement. And that does an initial blow up. Then using my filters and going to neural filters, there are some ones here specifically for old photos. So we'll come down to photo restoration and turn that on. And it's going to attempt to analyze and clean things up a little bit. So I'll tell it to do some scratch reduction. And effectively, it's using AI to try to rebuild the face and fill in some of the lower quality details. Now, it's slow because it's pretty intensive what it's going to try to do. But if you have an older photo that's really damaged, this is one of the quickest ways to fix it. You can, of course, use the healing brush and other tools to brush and clean things up. But this is a faster way of doing it to kind of fill that in a little bit. Okay. So that's almost done. We'll let that finish. Okay. And you see that it went pretty far. Now, under the adjustments here, you can deal with things like artifacts, noise, and I'm going to back off the enhance face slider because it went a little too far for my taste. You see that sometimes AI is a little too AI, but with a lower value here, it's pretty helpful still. Okay. Now you can use this or not. I just wanted you to see it exists. There are other tools out there also for doing sort of this old photo restoration. But usually if you do it in a less aggressive way on the enhancement, it's not going to be quite as aggressive and it tends to be all right. Then you also have an option called colorize. And this will analyze the picture and attempt to assign skin tones. What I suggest is you output it to a new color layer. So when you click OK and it renders these, you're going to end up with your photo on this layer. And this way you can go in with your brush and, continue just to paint over the areas of damage that the filter didn't clean up. And it is manual, but, these are our relatives. Like this is my grandmother who I haven't seen in a while since she passed. But I can go in and take the time to clean this up and just brush over those blemishes. I'm not going to do all of them, but you see how we sped that up. And then because this is on its own color layer, it becomes really simple to adjust. So down here where the red of the lips is going way too far, I can just eyedropper and select the peach, the cream of the skin, and instead just start to paint with that paintbrush. And so you can brush that in and start to fill those colors in. So this kind of makes it easy for you to see what's going on there. So what I'll do here, let's just undo, is turn that off and say, oh, okay, let's sample that. We'll sample the skin tone there and then just brush a little bit. so that that lip doesn't spill so far down. See? And then it's not too hard to sample the pink, go to another new layer, and brush that in a little bit, like so. And then simply put that into color mode, and you can lower the opacity. But by keeping these on their own layers there, it becomes much easier to brush in the colors that you need so that the colorization effect doesn't spill too far. But about 10 more minutes, and I'd be able to actually have a pretty good photo there. I'll save that back to Mylio. But here's something to keep in mind. I can save this right now. And because I'm going to save it with the layers intact, here's what's cool. It'll go into Mylio with layers intact. And Mylio will pick up that edit and drop it in next to the original here. And so as it scans, it'll pick that up. Later, when I'm ready to go back to that project and keep working, I can just select the layered file and again say photo open with. Open it up in Photoshop as an original, and all the layers will open up, and I can keep working with the photo and resume where I left off. So this is kind of that cool thing just to think about of how you have those handoffs, okay? Now, again, I only turned off cloud syncing. If you want to do the bulk of this editing and you have other syncs going on, just turn off sync in general. And when you're done working in the other app, you can just say scan for changes, and it will look on your local hard drive, scan, and in just a moment, it'll pick up those changes and drop them into Mylio. And so you'll see things pop back in, okay? So that's one of the easier ways to go ahead and do it. Just turn that. All right, Lori, any questions or anything you think we should show before we
Yeah,
open
well,
up for a couple questions?
there's a question in the chat from Ted. He's asking about using the underscore display.
Yep. What about it?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'll read it. Okay. He's using underscore display for export back to Mylio folder, inserts the new file adjacent to the original, right? I would not say stack because that means something different in other software.
So no, with display, it is stacked because when you look at it in Mylio, it doesn't show up next to it in the grid. It will actually show up on top of your other one, and that's the one you'll see when you browse. So it is absolutely stacked. That's why we use display. If we don't use display, then it's just written to the same folder and it shows up next to it. So display images are specific to because you do want to stack them. That's why I showed it. So I understand it's not a standard workflow, but it absolutely was very intentional. So when we do use that, it absolutely does stack. So that's why we can choose underscore display if we want it to be just that, an underscore display. Okay. By the way, there's that colored image that I had. And so it was there. I didn't use underscore display, but I did save the layered file. And you see how Mylio just picks it up and puts it right next to the original. So then I can come back to it. And so you get that benefit. And here's a few examples of some of those older photos that I have colorized and started to fix. And I've been just working my way through some of those in my family history. And so Photoshop's a fun way to do that. And this particular picture here was scanned in 5 parts and merged together. It was a really large print, but it was really quite damaged. And we were able to do quite a bit of fixing on it. So you can see here like 1/2 of that photo, and here it is all stitched together and then colorized to tell the whole story. So lots of fun there. So my great grandmother and great grandfather, and then my grandmother and her 2 brothers. So those are the types of pictures that bring a lot of joy to family members.
That's great. I always really enjoy looking at your library. It's just, I don't know anybody else that has such an extensive, grouping of family like you do. It's really neat to see.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Ted says thanks, by the way.
Sure, no problem. And I like to do this, particularly like when I'm going to do a black and white conversion with something. If I want to keep it stacked and I hand it off, I'll go ahead there and just edit that. And it'll hand it off, and then you can do your work. So in this case, I'm going to do a whole black and white conversion, right? Like play with different color filters, kind of dial that in, say, okay, I like that. The blue's getting a bit darker. Let's dial in the red. Then I lean into some film simulations and I can, very quickly audition different options until I kind of get the feeling that I'm going for. And then, I tend to like to put a little bit of a graduated filter in and just dial that in. Then when I go to save that, again, same thing, put it in the same folder as the original, file name underscore display. And so when I save that, it's done. It will put it right next to the file and I can close it. And then again, back in Mylio, uh, usually it'll pick it up pretty quickly. It just kind of depends if you're in the middle of a sync or not. Remember, if you want to nudge that, you just say scan for changes, and that will then sort of force it. And it will then, go through and pick that up. Normally, what's going to happen here is, Mylio in my case is watching 500,000 photos. So I understand that it takes a few minutes to pick up changes because it might be looking in one folder and scanning things. But the point is that either when you quit and come back or after a few minutes, those changes will be reflected inside of Mylio. And if you ever want to kind of understand what's going on with an image, you can see here under the storage panel, like what you have related to an image. So you'll then see if there happens to be a display image or anything else like that attached. It will pop up there and show up under associated files. Okay. And so that's an easy way to do those external edits and then start to stack. Or, sometimes you may find yourself doing variations. Like here, I had a chance to photograph Neil Armstrong's spacesuit. I had all of 60 seconds to get the shot before they put it back into the morgue, literally a morgue, because it's how they preserve the astronaut spacesuit. And I just have different variations of sharpening and intensity and detail. And I haven't decided which one I like yet. So that's an example of where I save them as separate files, all in the same folder, so I can come back to them. Cool. Any other questions before we wrap up? I got to pick my daughter up at school, but I appreciate being your guest. I normally work on our product team and try to take your feedback to make the app better. Um, I appreciate you guys using our product. And if you have feedback, please be sure to post it in the community and share things. But I wanted you to see today that Mylio really tries to be a world-class tool and making it easy to hand off to other apps and then pick up those changes. So just, have it watch the folder, open it, save it back to the same folder. All those changes get picked up, get put on all your backup drives, get put out there and shared. Just makes it so much easier to keep everything organized. So cool.
Great. Thanks,
Thanks,
Rich.
guys.
It's always a treat to have you do these with
Sure.
us, so appreciate it. Oh,
Sure, no
wait, there's
problem.
one more question from Harold. He's
Yep,
asking, with those multiple copies, how do you find and go back to the original?
sure. So that's where it can be helpful to just kind of look here in either the info panel or the storage panel. Um, One thing you can do is consider just applying a color label to the one that's the original, or depending upon when you save it, it'll all sort of depend on, like here you can sort by date, for example. And so if you're saving it as new files, they could get shifted. If you save it with the metadata preserved, then they'll just group. But usually I would either do that with a keyword or with a color label, so I knew which one was the original. Or if you're dealing with a raw file, you can just also look and sort of see, your date and timestamps. So it just kind of depends what you're doing. If you were doing the display image and you stacked it, then what's going to happen there is pretty straightforward. So, if I grab a raw file and I edit it externally or I'm working with an image, what will happen is in Mylio's edit panel, you'll see at the bottom the ability to switch between things like JPEG versus RAW. Or when you go to open the image, you can actually choose when you do open with which image opens. Is it the original file? Is it the display image? So you can do those sort of handoffs. So, or worst case scenario, you can always just right click on a picture and reveal it. And then, go right out to the Finder and grab that picture and do what you need to. So you always have that ability to, move around pretty easily. So, this is what I like. And, it becomes straightforward to just right click and say reveal in Finder. And, it will open up the folder hard drive and take you there and then drop you into that folder. And see, there it is right there. Yeah. So makes it pretty simple.
Great. Okay. All right,
Thanks,
everyone.
guys.
Thank you. Thanks so much for joining us. And Rich, we'll see you again, I
Yeah, I'll
think
be
next
back on.
week.
I think it's the week after, but yeah, I'll see you guys
Okay.
soon.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Rich. Bye-bye.